So today we are talking to a very accomplished sewist, a pattern designer, an author. She has 2 books to her name. She has been writing a blog since 2010, and she has a YouTube following of over 140,000 people. Who could we be talking about? Welcome to Bag Chat. So you might have figured we are talking to Sara Lawson of Sew Sweetness. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
It is great that you can give us some time because I know that you are a very busy woman like many of us who run sewing businesses. You're a mum and you have got your YouTube channel, which is blowing up for you. You've got your pattern. You've got so many hats that you wear, Sara. We will get into how you cope with all that later, but I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me.
Thank you.
So we're going to ask a couple of quickfire questions, which I ask all my guests. And the first one is, how did you learn to sew?
I learned to sew when I was in school. My mother taught me and a friend, her name was Amy, to make 2 different sewing projects. So we made a knit top or a dress and then also a drawstring bag. So the knit top I was really proud of. Mine was actually longer, so it was more like a dress. And at school we had a particular day each month where you could wear whatever you want. So I wore my dress and my friend agreed to wear her dress on the same day. And I showed up in mine and she was wearing regular clothes and I was like, what happened to your outfit? And she said her mom wouldn't allow her to wear hers, since a child had made it. It wasn't, certainly a perfect looking garment, but I was really proud of mine. That kind of started things off. I didn't really start sewing again until I was an adult. I was about to have my 2 children, and I just needed like a hobby, something to do in the evenings in the house. And so I started picking up sewing again at that time.
That's awesome. And it's often our mothers and our grandmothers that teach us to sew, isn't it? It's a thing that's been lost now, and hopefully that we can inspire the younger generation to pick it up again.
Yeah, I think, my daughter's 16 right now and she has 2 friends and sometimes they come over for like a sewing day. And thankfully I have extra sewing machines, as most of us that sew do. And so they like making stuffed animals. So they made a couple stuffed animal projects, a little rabbit as a gift for a teacher who was having a baby. And then they made another stuffed animal on a separate occasion. So I'm happy that she wants to sew at least once in a while.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good on you. So you started sewing clothes, which a lot of us do. How did that transition into bags?
There was a fabric designer, her name's Amy Butler, and she had a pattern book of all bag sewing patterns. And I had a friend who, on her blog, had coordinated a monthly sew-along. So each month, people that wanted to participate, we made a different, in order as they were presented in the book. We made 1 bag each month from the 12 bags in the book. And I just found that I really loved making bags. I loved the different interfacings. At the time, I didn't really know what I was doing as far as choosing interfacings, but I just went with what Amy had suggested in her book, and I just really liked the structure. It was a fun project, and as I'm also a quilter, making a bag is generally faster than making a full quilt and quilting it on your machine. So I like that aspect as well, like a faster finish.
Yeah. I'm a bit impatient that way, and I have actually never made a quilt, and it's something that one day I will get to. I'm the reverse, I think. But I love the structure in bags too. But yeah, the interfacing is a big learning curve, isn't it, when you start making bags?
Oh, yeah, there's so many different types. There's also different manufacturers that make interfacings, also people that live in other countries besides the United States. There's different types available that might be similar but are called by different names. So it's a lot to navigate when you're first starting off with making bags.
Yeah, I agree. So you have had quite a varied sewing career, but you actually design bags as well and have a couple of books on bag making to your name. And I will put all your links below to all of those things because I think people need to check them out. But what about the bag designing process? Is it that keeps you coming back for more or that you really enjoy?
I love it. The writing process is my absolute favorite. I find that for a lot of the crafts that I do, like this year I learned how to crochet, I feel like the actual process of it, I'm much more invested in than the final product, if you will. So for designing sewing patterns, like the writing process is my most favorite. Right now I'm in the middle of writing two different sewing patterns and just actually writing the sewing instructions. I write the sewing instructions before I sit down to cut the fabric out and sew the bag at this point, and I just really love like working through the instructions and trying to figure out how things will go in my head. And sometimes when I finish writing, then I go back and think, well, no, that order won't work, or you forgot this, you need to add something else in, that kind of thing. So I really love the writing process.
That's completely the opposite to me. I'll do the pattern pieces and I'll send you that to do the instructions for me. Isn't it funny how we've all got our own process? What does that process look for you?
So I start off with like a very basic sketch. I'm not great at sketching, but like in my mind, I just need at least like the outline of it. Like, are there going to be zippers on the front? Where's the strap going to be placed? Is it going to be on the sides of the bag? Things like that. Then I kind of work out a general supply list, like what the fabric amounts, or at least my best guess at the fabric amounts at that point, because I'm just starting out, what hardware I'll need, zippers, and then I will start. Generally, I draft the pattern pieces first, and then I start writing the instructions, but the one I'm working on right now, like, I felt like it was going to be really complex to write, so I just wanted to sort of get into the writing first, and then as soon as I'm done with that, I'll start drafting the pattern pieces, but that's where it starts. So once I have the instructions, the pattern pieces, then I'll cut my fabric and interfacing out. Generally, as you know, it's not a quick process, cutting out the fabric and attaching the interfacing, so I'll normally do that in a separate day. I'll just do that in one day and save like the beginning of the sewing for the next day so I can be fresh for that process. And then I'll just work off my instructions. I take notes as I'm going through in red pen just so I can find it easily. And then I'll just sew each step. I'll write down corrections, or if I need to add something in there, I'll add that. Or my patterns, I have helpful hints like in red italics. And so while I'm sewing the project, if I think there's something that's maybe not part of the instruction, but like an extra tip that'll make that step a little bit easier, those are the things I find like while I'm actually sewing off my instructions. And I take my step photos while I'm in the middle of that process as well. So by the time I'm finished sewing the first bag or pouch or what have you, then I have a pattern with step photos, and then that's ready to go to the pattern testers.
That's awesome. It's really quite a complex process, isn't it? You know, I don't know if a lot of people realize how much goes into that, but I actually enjoy the prototype process. Yeah, I just love playing with the physical pieces of fabric. The other thing I've started doing, you said you cut one day and you sew the next. I just don't like the prep. So what I've got in my head now is I sew and I prep in the same day. Then I come back and it's all prepped, ready just to do that awesome, just straight through sew it at the end.
Okay.
And that way I'm starting to enjoy my cutting more, because I know I'm not going to try and rush and do it. I'm just going to do a bit of the prep and then do it. So I think for me it's a mindset of separating the two jobs. But yeah, isn't it?
That makes sense.
You find your own process, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you've got quite a few patterns and some of them are really awesome. Have you got any of your bags close by?
This is the 9-bark backpack.
Yeah.
It's got zippers on the sides. I have a bunch behind me too. I don't know if there's particular bags you'd like to see, or
No, just
this is the Sheffield tool bag. It was made in waxed canvas, and also kind of, as opposed to being for tools, this particular one's like for a baby bag, which hence the forest animals on the front and the back.
Now, I haven't made a diaper bag since my very first bag over 40 years ago, and that's something I need to do. So that's a really good look. I like that.
Thank you.
Wax canvas look. That's something I hadn't have thought about for a diaper bag. Yeah, that's awesome. But what is your favourite design and what makes it your favourite design?
That's a tough one. I feel like it's always a recent pattern, and it's not necessarily because of how the finished bag looks, but just for me, because the design process is my most favorite. I guess a recent one for me would be the Heartlands backpack.
Okay, yeah.
I designed it with like several different pocket options. It's a sling backpack. It really tested me because I wanted to get the 3 different design options in there, but because they're just options, they're optional. And so part of the challenge for me in this particular pattern is to write it in a way that it's clear what fabrics you need to cut for each option and also which steps apply to each option instead of I just didn't want it to be confusing for people that might not want to do any of the 3 options because the bag can be made without the 3 options. So I just wanted to be very like crystal clear what needed to be done for what options you chose. And so I think I was happy with the finished product, but while I was writing it, certainly it was, I'd not done one like that in a long time. So it was a good challenge for me.
Awesome. Yeah, they can get quite confusing, can't they, if it's how it's put in the pattern. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice one. So I know a lot of designers have a signature look. They've got a signature thing that is in every one of their patterns. Do you have something like that that's a favourite technique or a bit of hardware that you have to use? Or
I do like a lot of zipper pockets, but I think as far as pockets or other options or even ways of doing certain pockets, I like to change it up every once in a while so that I try to think of the customer that sews a lot of my patterns, and I try to think about throwing new or different skills in the pattern, especially for those that are sewing a lot of Sew Sweetness projects. And so I kind of like attempting to do things differently. Like for instance, like not all of my patterns are sewn right sides together. Once in a while I'll throw a pattern in that's the lining is finished with binding just for an introduction for the different skills if people might not have tried them before. And obviously I know not everyone likes every method as their favorite. Like I know a lot of people don't like finishing things with binding, but I think in certain projects, I think it provides even more structure than the interfacing can give. Like I have a good sized backpack that was the back part was finished with binding because I wanted to give it, I call it like a skeleton. Kind of gives like more of a rigid structure for that back of the backpack, which is what I wanted for that particular bag and the size of the bag and the interfacings that I chose. I think changing up the skills or techniques every once in a while is potentially helpful to people that are sewing a lot of my patterns.
I agree with you on the binding. I think you can't get the same structure or the same look of a bag without the binding. It's very difficult. So I kind of try and encourage everyone to just persevere and try and learn binding if they can.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a time when we did a lot of binding, cotton binding. So I'm a cotton bias girl.
Mm-hmm.
I do try these other methods, but I keep going back to my cotton binding.
Yeah.
With your design process, because there's so many people, we're all on a different journey, right? You know, some people are just starting sewing. What do you do to try and make your patterns more accessible to the different levels of sewists?
I think, just speaking for myself, I think the step videos that I offer, we have, for my free patterns, we have free videos, and then for the rest of my patterns, the paid patterns, we have an optional paid video that we charge for. And I feel like because I'm sewing the entire project on camera and we don't fast forward through any steps, I think it makes it more accessible for a confident beginner, an intermediate sewist, or even an advanced sewist, just because you see exactly what I'm doing. And also when you see me run things through the sewing machine, I might be in particular places stopping to smooth out the corners or doing different things. And I'll sometimes mention, like, for instance, lengthen your stitch length for this top stitching, and that all those extra things aren't necessarily in the pattern instructions, but to see me like handle the fabric and do different things, I feel like helpful to see on video, and the entire process, I feel like it just makes things more accessible, I think.
Yeah. And I'm a very visual learner. Even though I write patterns, I learn visually. So I'll read the pattern and I'll go, no, okay, I'll watch the video. And it just cements what you're reading before you start sewing. But I like the way you charge for your videos because there is such a huge amount of time that goes into tutorial sewing videos. And I don't know if people appreciate the hours of editing and hours of, doing a video. There's a lot to it.
Well, also my husband works with me full time, and that's his job, the technology, and we're constantly updating our technology to make things either easier to see or more exciting on social media. So I think for us, it just makes sense to charge for the videos just because we've invested so much manpower and thought process into them.
Well, when he's got some spare hours, I'm happy to employ him to do some work for me. I think it's great when a husband and wife can work together because I really love that interaction between the two of you and your videos on your lives.
Thank you.
It's just really makes it just so natural and relatable. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
So, is there any challenges that you faced with your designing process or a continual challenge that you have to deal with?
I guess I like projects with a lot of steps. And I think in the last year, my personal challenge to myself was to kind of still make exciting looking projects, but fine tune things to make them not all so lengthy. So for instance, the patterns that I designed last year, like, of course, I'm not going to sacrifice design to keep like a shorter amount of steps, but like around 30 steps to me, I would be happy with, within my personal challenge. And also trying to design projects that are like very short that are appropriate for beginners. I designed a pouch this year called the Dogwood Pouch. It comes in 10 different sizes. And me personally, I think it's a striking looking project, but it's very fast to sew. And I feel like a beginner could sew it as well. And the reason I decided to come up with 10 different sizes is because that was most patterns I have to have like a personal challenge to make it exciting for myself. So the personal challenge for this one was the 10 different sizes because all the shapes were different. I think it took me probably about 3 weeks to prototype like all the sizes, which is not, for me, that's not like a normal amount of time for prototyping, but because the exteriors and the linings were both completely separate looking pieces, that's just how long it took. And in the middle of it, I thought, you know what? Why don't you just stop with 3 sizes and be done with it? And then, you can move on to pattern testing. But I thought, just stick with it a little bit longer. You'll get your 10 sizes, then you'll be much happier with that.
Yeah. I love having options, especially, when you got your pen, you can do this and you can do that, and there's so many different sizes. And I think people see that as value for money. Do you know what I mean? Like when there's more to a pattern, like for a sewing pattern, I would like to buy something that's got a skirt and a trouser and a top, not just one thing. So I've sort of moved that over to my bag, but it's a process, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the bag designing process. Now, I know that you do a lot of teaching in your Sewcial Sundays and things. What are some tips for some new bag makers?
I have a tutorial section on my website with bag making techniques, and I try to tailor them to like what I call generalized demonstrations. And by that, I mean, I try to present the information and I'm conscious of my wording to try to make the technique adaptable to whatever pattern that they're working on. For example, I recently did one with a side pocket that secures with cording and cord lock at the top so that you could kind of cinch it closed and make it looser depending on what you're putting in the side pocket, maybe a water bottle or something else. And I drafted a few different sizes of side pockets, thinking it would give the sewist kind of a starting off point that they could use my pattern pieces and adapt them to whatever project that they're working on, depending on how wide the side panel in that particular bag is. And so I try to make the demonstrations generalized like that so that people can, it's enough information in the demonstration that they can hopefully take that and like implement it in real time rather than just a demonstration, but then they have to figure out measurements or pieces or something of the sort. So I try my best to make the demonstrations as general as possible so that they can be used in, not just my patterns or whatever pattern that they're working on.
Yeah, I think that's great to have that general knowledge outside the pattern you're working on, because people don't know how to change it up necessarily. They love the shape, but they want a side pocket because they need it, or their customer wants a side bottle. So that's really awesome. And you've got quite a comprehensive list of videos there, which is really helpful. Everybody has access to that. That is really generous of you. That's awesome. Yeah, and that's why you've obviously built such an amazing YouTube community. How long ago did you start your YouTube?
I feel like maybe 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you feel that helps a business integrate the community?
I feel like just connecting with the customers and also like doing the live shows, seeing the same people show up for for every show in the comments, just because we start the show. The shows are Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Now they're the first Sunday of every month, just because we've scaled them back a little bit. But generally, like an hour or so before the show actually starts, people are starting to kind of assemble, especially on YouTube, and they're talking to each other in the comments. And I really like the connection of this, a lot of the same people showing up for each show, talking to each other. Sometimes there's a question that people ask me on the show that I don't know the answer to, and almost 100% I feel confident that somebody will pipe up in the comments with suggestions, usually more than one person, and we like to post those up on the screen just to make sure all the questions get answered.
Yeah. That makes it a really community feel, doesn't it? And people feel comfortable being there. That's really awesome. I think that's something a lot of us aspire to, but you've really cracked that recipe, and that's awesome. Yeah. So if anyone doesn't watch, please put it on your calendar. As I said, the links will be down below, because not only is it entertaining, but it's very educational. Sarah does book reviews and techniques and tools. And yes, I learned something about thimble tape the other day, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Yep.
So, and tools is something we see a lot of people doing pattern reviews. I'd love to see someone do the latest tool reviews, because we all need to use tools. Yeah. I don't know about you, but someone said to me, I don't bother with a stiletto. And I'm like, okay, why? Oh, no, I've been sewing for years. And I'm like, just try it. You might find it actually improves holding things together.
Yeah.
I think people get to a point where they feel they don't need tools, but they are tools to help you, not,
right.
There's a purpose for them. So, yeah. So now, as I said, you're a mum. You've got your YouTube channel. Do you still write your blog?
Certainly. I started my blog in 2010, I think it was. So I certainly don't blog as much as I did at the time, but the blog is a helpful place for me. Every time I post a new bag making technique video, I have it on the blog just so you can find it there, as well as on YouTube. And also, a lot of times with the techniques, I have free PDF printable pattern pieces, so I need to have those hosted somewhere. So the blog is a helpful resource for that, as well as pattern tester photos when I have new patterns coming out. We have all those on the blog, so the blog's certainly helpful for certain things. Yeah.
Yeah. And Google loves a blog, doesn't it? It's really helpful for
Yeah, that's true.
For analytics and everything, or for the algorithm and everything else. So how do you balance all of this? Your blog, your YouTube, the family, because you're a mum, you're a wife. How do you do it all?
Well, I couldn't do it without my husband's support, just because of the certainly all the technology, the video. He's always researching new ways to do things. And I think also doing things that are not work is helpful, just to give my mind a time to rest. So, yeah.
So what are your hobbies outside work?
I have a horse, so I go to the barn a lot. My daughter rides also, so most days of the week we're at the barn. I learned how to crochet this year, so in the evenings I'm always working on new sweaters. I'm really into native plants and native gardening, so not in the winter, but the rest of the year I'm constantly, as long as the ground is not frozen, I can put in trees or shrubs. So there's a lot of opportunities to be outside, walking my dog, nature, all that. Those are all things I'm interested in.
And I think it's important to have that, isn't it? To have that balance, or else it is very easy for work to become 24/7.
Yeah, especially when you work in your house. Any moment of the day could potentially be a work moment.
And have you managed to switch off the devices?
I think so. I mean, there's some social media I just limit myself to. But I do have a lot of online friends that I talk to, and using Facebook, I just like to see what people are up to. Yeah.
I find it good to see what new materials and things are coming out too, because
that's true.
Being in New Zealand, we don't get things. Or if we do, someone's having to import it and they're like, hey, guess what I got from, So it's to see what people are using and how they're using it is quite useful, especially as designers, if we're looking at what's around that people can use, or a new product comes up and you think, that bag I wanted to create, that would actually work on that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's good to keep in touch, isn't it? Staying inspired, often sewers are at home by themselves, and to stay inspired to keep sewing is difficult. Have you got any tricks that you've learnt to keep the passion alive?
Well, for my business, certainly I have a Facebook group, and when people finish sewing one of my patterns, they'll often post pictures of it in the group. I feel like that is a really great way to get reinforcement for what you've accomplished. And, people will say in the comments, great job, or I like the zipper you used, or I like how you changed the strap. So I think that's a really great way to stay inspired. I'm certainly, for some of my other hobbies, I'm certainly in Facebook groups for things like that. And it really just keeps the thoughts going and just, the interests in any of my other hobbies going. So I feel like that's the same for sewing too.
Do you still sew for the family or for fun or clothing or just for business?
I would say a few times a year I'll make a quilt, but other than that, just sewing for if I'm working on a new pattern or video.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how for a lot of people was a hobby and it becomes work, and it's just for work. But I'm hoping to sew some clothes this year. I'm going to set up my domestics again and I'm going to sew some clothes, I've decided. We'll see. Putting it out there, hopefully it keeps me accountable.
Yeah.
All right. So building that Sew Sweetness community, it's got quite a nice size. How do you keep engaged and keep it growing?
I wish I could comment on every single picture that comes through, but I do my best. I think between that and the live show, I think it's a really great way to stay connected, answering the emails. Danny helps me with a few of them, but majority of the emails I'm answering, and I like that people know that they can come to me if they're struggling with something or if they have a question. We reply to 100% of the emails that come through.
Good on you. That's dedication. And that's obviously why you've grown such a good community. Yeah. So we've got some quick-fire questions that I've had people come through and ask that I need to ask all my guests. And the first one is, what is your go-to bag design tip for beginners?
I have a free pattern. It's called the Baker Street bag, and it also comes with a free video. You can find it on my website or on YouTube, and that's the one I suggest for beginners. It has a bit of sewing through curves. You'll learn how to install a zipper if you haven't already, and I feel like it's a nice small to medium sized bag. I had someone email me the other day for a first bag for like a tween, like a younger teenager, and that's the one I recommended for that person as well.
I'm actually seeing a lot more males starting to sew bags too, so maybe that's what we need to.
I have a bunch of guys in my Facebook group that are sewing bags, so yeah.
I think it's great. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite sewing tool that you can't live without?
I have a tool called a precision turning tool. I have a huge mess over here. I don't know if I have it within easy grasp, but I like it for gently pushing out corners. If you don't have a stiletto, in a pinch, this could potentially function as a stiletto as well. I really love it. It's a great tool.
And I firmly believe that. I've lost mine. I need to buy another one. I don't know how it's got lost. It'll be behind a cabinet or something, no doubt.
I'm on my second one, so the first one was lost.
So we need to buy these things in threes, don't we?
Yeah, I guess so.
So what's the best advice you've received about balancing work and family?
That's a good question. I feel like I guess maybe not advice that I've been given, but just something that I just came to over time, that trying to force things to happen as far as, new patterns, new designs. For me personally, it doesn't work. So if an idea is not coming to me, I will just, instead of trying to keep hammering away at it, keep drilling until I force something to happen, I find that I'm more successful if I just kind of sit on it, either move on to a different task in the business, give that particular task that I was struggling with, or if it was a design, give it some breathing room and just let things come to me. It might not be something that can be solved. I might find a different idea to focus on that can replace the one that I was struggling with as far as the designs go. But I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like things in my early sewing career that I tried to just force, over time, they just didn't maybe stand up over time. Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah. Because if we're just forcing ourselves to find a solution, it's not necessarily something we're going to be happy with either. Whereas sometimes it just comes to you, doesn't it, that solution later on
In the
if you
middle
walk away.
of the night while you're sleeping, it just wakes you up.
Yeah, I've come to this saying sometimes you just have to put it down and walk away. Unless there's a very stressful deadline, just walk away. And often the next day it's a totally different scenario. Yeah. So what's your favourite fabric to use? Now, I see all the amazing fabrics you get on your Sewcial Sundays, but what is your favourite base of fabric or type of fabric to use?
Honestly, generally I'm using quilting cotton just for the fact of when I'm writing a sewing pattern, earlier how I explained my process, the first prototype is the first what I'm using for my step photos. And so vinyls or cork, generally I'd prefer not to keep ripping seams for that. And sometimes, in my step photo bags, sometimes I need to rip a lot of seams. And just quilting cotton is just much more forgiving. And also the second time I make the bag is when we're filming the video, and just the way our video setup is, I kind of have to step back a little bit from the sewing machine. Like normally I'm kind of in close, but because I can't block the lighting or the camera with my head, I have to step back a little bit, and I just feel more comfortable with quilting cotton rather than something else. I'm not saying I can't sew with something else. It's stressful is not the word, but it requires a lot of patience to film something on camera and explain it well. And I'd just rather not have to worry about extra thicknesses or other things while I'm filming a project.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. In fact, I find also that my cotton bags or my printed fabric bags seem to be selling better than my vinyl bags these days. I think people are looking for something a little bit different.
Okay.
You can get plenty of black bags at the shops and what have you, but you can't get these amazing prints that we can get in quilting cotton.
Yeah, that's true.
That you can get. So I think it gives people a bit more option, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've been involved with designing thread and the Anvil threads. Have you been involved with designing fabrics and things as well?
I did. This was years ago now, but I designed 2 lines of fabric for Art Gallery Fabrics. I loved the learning process. It was a really great experience that I'm grateful for. I just think designing fabric and designing patterns are 2 full-time jobs, and I didn't want to just do okay at 2 things. I wanted to do my best at one, and the thing I was most passionate about, and that was the sewing patterns.
Well, that leads us right into, so what's in the future? I'm sure you've got a few patterns tucked away that you're working on.
I'm working on the next set of 4 patterns right now. I've got 3 instructions finished. I need 1 more, so that was another situation where I was struggling coming up with the 4 designs, and it was another example of, okay, don't just force something through, go, I rode my horse, worked on my crochet, did other things, and then when the idea came to me, I was like, all right, time to continue on. But I didn't contain myself in the sewing room and just say all right, you got to stay here until you get that next design done. You can't leave until you've got it, No, I didn't. Yeah.
So I've noticed that you release your pattern in blocks, so sets of patterns. Have you always worked that way, or that's just what works for you?
I'm trying to think how many years we've been doing it like that. Yeah, it's been a good amount of years we've been doing it like that. I just feel like it builds more excitement having for example, the 4 new projects at once. And the process for us is kind of streamlined now. I know how I'm going to be juggling because we're doing the 4 at once. I know how I'm going to be juggling that. I have my my outline with a checklist of every time I finish, a task for each pattern, I check it off the checklist. It's just kind of a really smooth process for us at this point, and it's just easier to do the 4 at once rather than just a single at a time.
I'm a checklist girl as well. You write it out and tick it off. And it's a sense of achievement, isn't it? Every time you tick off something on that checklist.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I've done nothing today. And then I look at my list and go, yes, I have.
Yeah, right.
And that's my piece of advice for people who are coping with family and work. Put 2 checklists down, work and family. And they've got to be both on that list, because you can't just keep pushing one off for the other. It's a balance.
That's true. Yeah, it is.
So where should we find you? What social medias are you keeping up with, and what's the best to keep in following you?
The newsletter is the best way to. I send out a couple newsletters every month with just, new things going on, new video demonstrations, things like that. I have, we're on YouTube for the Sewcial Sunday shows, and you don't necessarily have to tune in live. You can always watch the recording of the shows anytime. I have my Facebook page, Facebook group, Instagram. We're starting to get into TikTok, and I think that's about all the places.
Yeah, TikTok's a different learning curve, isn't it?
Yeah, my husband recently set up a second studio in our basement for filming short form video just because we hadn't really been doing that in the past. And he spent a good amount of time, a few weeks, maybe a couple months, like figuring out how to set up that studio. So I think we're on our way with that.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing those and seeing the progress. Yeah. I think you need to clone your husband and rent them out.
Yeah.
So we've got your patterns to look forward to. Any kind of tentative date for release of those?
I used to pick a date in advance and let people know, and it always kind of got me in trouble because then things weren't ready and we were like really stressed out at the last. So I've learned to not announce anything until we've finished filming all the videos, the step-by-step videos for the projects. Then I will pick a date and announce, because then that means a good amount of the work has already been done. But yeah, I hesitate to announce any dates until all that's done.
So sometime in the new year, we shall see a new set of patterns.
Yes.
Okay, we look forward to that. So is there any final words of wisdom, or any final words you'd like to say to our listeners?
I think just with any sewing project, just keep sewing more. Don't worry about any of the projects being, I'm not a perfectionist sewist. I know some people are, and that's perfectly fine, but don't worry about things being perfect. Just sew for the experience, for the learning. Keep sewing one project after another, and before you know it, you'll feel really confident in your skills. But it's, with anything, you're not going to off the jump be really confident and expert at it. I still don't consider myself an expert at anything sewing related, and it's just a mountain continual sewing process and a learning journey, and that's kind of how I look at it.
And I think enjoy the process.
Mm-hmm, right.
It's like just slow it down sometimes and enjoy that process. Yeah. It has been really great having you on today, and I'm sure that people have learnt lots. And as I said, I'll put all your links down below, so I hope people go and check you out if they haven't already. And I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for being on the show, Sarah. It has been really great.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Another episode of Bag Chat, and thank you so much for your time, Sarah. Wasn't that amazing? She has so many strings to her bow. I am in awe. So do check out her links. So we still have some exciting episodes to come. So once again, thanks for watching, and this is Bag Chat.